Last year, President Macron spoke about Taiwan. He said, Europe should not be caught in conflicts that are not ours.
He was trying to clarify his comments later, emphasizing opposition to Beijing's threats.
Because securing stability across the Taiwan Strait is all of our responsibility.
And the instability is a problem for the whole world.
A blockade of the Taiwan Strait could cost the global economy $10 trillion or even more.
And that's more than the economic slowdown caused by the COVID-19.
5 times more than Putin's illegal war in Ukraine.
This is unthinkable. It's something we can't allow.
And it is a very real risk.
More must be done to prevent this.
Not solely to protect the people of Taiwan and their right to self-determination,
but for the people of every one of our countries who will all be deeply affected.
But we cannot prevent what we cannot see.
That's why we're launching Operation Mist.
Asking governments to measure the impact of a shock in the Taiwan Strait and prepare for it.
To ensure that nobody can say they didn't know. To protect our interests.
And to ensure the people of Taiwan receive the support they deserve.
A shock in the Taiwan Strait would not only affect the people of Taiwan, but have far-reaching impacts on regional and global security and prosperity. Over the past few years, links between lawmakers in Taiwan and the rest of the world have grown stronger than ever before. To safeguard Taiwan's way of life and ensure the importance of Taiwan Strait security is understood far beyond Taiwan, this has to continue. That's why I'm delighted to announce that this July, IPEC's 2024 summit will be held in Taipei, bringing the largest ever delegation of foreign members of parliament to Taiwan. Let's continue to learn from one another and work together.
And our work doesn't stop there. Yes, we need to raise awareness of the economic risks. Yes, we need more interparliamentary exchange. But we also need to have meaningful deterrence. Beijing must understand that an air or maritime blockade would cross a red line.
And the free world must state without any doubt that violations of the status quo will bring serious consequences. Taiwan's security is our own security. Please sign our pledge to stand for democracy, for self-determination, and to stand for Taiwan.
Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. So, was President Macron correct? Is it true that Taiwan is a US-China issue? Is it true that Taiwan is therefore not our problem? How advanced are Beijing's foreign influence and interference operations around the world? Is the democratic world prepared to sacrifice short-term economic gain for the sake of the survival of the international rules and human rights protections upon which predictable international relations rely? In short, will we allow the new axis of authoritarianism to prevail? These are some of the questions we're going to try to explore in our panel today. But we should be honest, as others have said this morning, we have been losing ground. But this isn't solely because authoritarians have exploited markets and developed strategic dependencies. It's because many have forgotten the price paid for the freedoms that we take for granted. We cannot rely on the assumption that democratic values will simply be inherited by future generations. When we ourselves fail to embody those values, we assist those who wish to undermine the democratic order. In every generation, we have to win again the argument for democracy and the rules that govern international relations. Okay, the good news is that, as shown by the Interparliamentary Alliance on China, IPAC, there are politicians all over the world prepared to sacrifice for those values, even if it means that they have to transcend party and borders to do it. In the video you've just seen, Anders Fogh Rasmussen called upon all politicians present today to sign a pledge. That pledge is online, it's in the app, and it's also on the IPAC website. That's ipac.global for those not using the app. That pledge is already gathering a lot of signatures from around the world, different political parties, and I hope that those among you who can sign, legislators, will do so. Okay, so moving on to our panel discussion. With me to discuss these issues are some politicians from around the world who have worked to confront Beijing's increasingly assertive stance on the international stage. They're people who have also courageously confronted their own governments for being reactive, slow, inadequate in their response to Beijing, with too many still laboring under wildly outdated understandings of what the Chinese Communist Party under Xi Jinping actually is. So please join me in welcoming Senator Cecilia Requena, our new member of IPAC, all the way from Bolivia, from the European Union, David Lega, MEP, and from just around the corner, here in Copenhagen, Uffe Elbæk. Please welcome them to the panel. Thank you. So, David, I'm going to come to you first, if I may. It's no secret that you're stepping down from politics this year, and I guess that means that you're a bit freer to say what you think, free of party constraints. Can you tell the audience today, what you think is getting in the way of deeper integration between the Taiwanese economy and the EU? And maybe if you can also give us some of your predictions for EU-Taiwan relations in the coming years.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having us here today. I think I've been quite free during the whole mandate. I've been trying to be honest and true to my mandate, and I would say that things have changed rather rapidly during the mandate as well. It's not the same EU and its look on Taiwan and China today as it was in 2019 when I was elected. I mean, things changed after Russia's illegal war on Ukraine. I think the naivety of many of my colleagues disappeared. I mean, we all know politics is based on and built on, in many good ways, on conflict and different opinions. And usually we have the party ideological conflict, and we also have the national conflict. But when it came to China, I would say that the main conflict was depending on which committee you were sitting on. Were you working on foreign affairs and trade? You had completely different views on China. And that changed, and the naivety became less. I think that many people realized that we were too naive with Putin, and we can't afford to be it again. So nowadays it's easier. We managed to get a lot of things done when it comes to China. We froze the investment agreement. Yep. I think it's frozen for eternity. I hope so. It should be. And we managed also, on my amendment, to recognize the ongoing genocide of Uyghurs in Xinjiang. Those things are important, and that's where it started changing. So I see only better things when it comes to the Taiwanese-EU relationships. I think that we realize more and more that we are dependent of each other. What worries me more is that we need to maintain and strengthen the transatlantic link, and that we need to work closer with the US, regardless of our opinions when it comes to their election results in the next presidential elections. We need to make sure that we work together, because my real worry is that EU will focus on Russia, US will focus on China, and no one will care about Iran. We need to treat these three threats together. That helps us in our resilience against China, and also to create a better world.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. Can I just press you slightly just on one aspect there, the what is getting in the way thing? Because we always found that when it came to the European Parliament, there was broad consensus for most actions around China, but they wouldn't really go anywhere. So perhaps you could set out that difficulty for us.
Well, I think the Parliament has been harder and more efficient when it comes to what we should do than the Commission has been doing. But I see also now it's a good time to push politicians when it's election time, and we see almost all commissioners, including our president of the Commission, being a lot stronger on China now. What we need to make sure is that the ones that will continue for the next mandate will continue to hold everyone to their promise in the election times. But naturally, they have had a softer approach. I think that is gone. That is my view when I hear the corridor talks.
Thank you. Moving to you, Uffe, during your time with IPAC, you got hacked by state-sponsored actors. I think I'm okay in saying now it's fairly public domain.
Totally okay.
And you also faced legal repercussions from the Hong Kong authorities for your support for the pro-democracy movement. You were even reprimanded in the Danish Parliament for taking to the stage with a pro-Hong Kong democracy T-shirt. Tell us how, as a parliamentarian, you've been able to negotiate your commitment to those causes, like for the cause of freedom in Hong Kong, and party constraints and normal political constraints that obviously parliamentarians experience.
First of all, I'll say to you, David, that I totally agree with the change of the atmosphere in the European Parliament, and I'm really happy about that. I just want to say that I'm on the same line as you here. But concerning your question, Luke, I have to say that I have been on a journey when it comes to China, and I think it's a journey that many of us here in the room and outside this room has been on from in the zeros, where I had actually a very positive approach to what was happening in China. The talks I had with friends in both in Beijing and in Hong Kong said the same story, that actually there was more space for critical dialogue. I saw that the artist was more daring in the way they did the art. I talked with people in the LGBT community. There was a kind of China was opening up, and I think at least my approach was that the economic development would go hand in hand with democratic development. And as a culture minister, I was invited to Beijing in the beginning of 2012, and still there I had this feeling that China was on the right track, and I had very honest discussion with my Chinese colleagues. But over the years, after that, things changed in Hong Kong. I became much more aware about what was happening internally in China. And through my work in the parliament, in the Danish parliament, actually my view was broadened to not only focusing on how China was cheating their own citizens, but actually started to get a much broader picture about China's ambition on the world stage and how they wanted to actually define the new rule of the game on the world stage, and not only economically but scientifically, way into the different committees in the United Nations, etc., etc. And I tried to, of course, to stand up for that and try to push my own government and my own colleagues in the Danish Parliament. And of course, it was in the beginning, I had the experience that my government was walking on eggshells. They really didn't dare to take a stand. And when they had to come out with a more critical approach, it was always packed in arguments that really didn't hurt the Chinese feelings. So it has been, for me, really a journey, honestly. Now I have this arrest order hanging over my head. My computer has been hacked. Still tomorrow and tomorrow again, there will be critical articles, I expect, in the Danish media about how the Danish part has acted and so on. So it's an ongoing issue, and we just have to be brave. And I take it as a patch of honor that China thinks I'm something.
Well, all I'd respond with, there is somebody who is living in Australia who otherwise would be in prison because of your work.
Exactly,
So we're all very grateful to you.
Yeah.
Moving on to you, Cecilia, and to Bolivia. Clearly, Bolivia has sought to strengthen ties with China in order to improve economic growth. Yeah. Recently, Bolivia started using the yuan to pay for its imports and exports, becoming the latest country in South America to do so. There's some concern that the relationship is eating into Bolivia's natural resources, and I really want to know how this developing relationship undermines, erodes democratic institutions where you live, and what scope do you see for pushing back against that?
Yes, thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be here. And kind regards to the other panelists. Well, the relationship between China and Bolivia is very similar to, the ones that China has with some other countries in the region, in South America or Central America particularly, but also Africa and some of Asia. But there are some specificities I would like to mention in Bolivia's case. It's not only the economical reason, which is a huge one, but China doesn't invest in Bolivia. That's very different. It invests in Peru and some other countries. In Bolivia, China didn't have to invest in order for Bolivia's government to give up everything to China. Why? Because it is an ideological alliance. And that's a very important aspect to understand about Bolivia. It began with Evo Morales, you might remember him, and he got into power in 2006. And from then on, it's almost 20 years, the relationship with China has been, a special relationship based on anti-imperialism. That's what they say. The problem is that anti-imperialism, which I find justified, of course, doesn't apply to China or to Russia or to Iran, because they sometimes work together in my country. So that's a problem. And the thing is, they use the economic means. In this case, we are just receiving loans from China. We are paying everything, and there is no conditionality, as you may know, which is a difference between some other financial institutions regarding human rights, environment, labor rights. No conditionality. You just can do whatever you want, and China will give you the money. And then, so there's another aspect of it which undermines democracy, which is there's no transparency and there's no accountability. And it is also true that there's some kind of conditionality, which is, okay, we give you the money, but you have to hire Chinese companies, Chinese goods, Chinese services, Chinese workers. You know that. Okay, that's universal. And in many cases, there is no a real competition. The government has accustomed itself to just choose Chinese companies like this without public, how do you say that? Licitation? Yeah, licitation, which is really serious. And that has consequences, many consequences, in the quality of the infrastructure that is being built, which of course is it's terrible for the most poor among Bolivians and the most vulnerable, because they depend more than anyone on public infrastructure. They are also, and I'm rounding this idea up, they are also building some plants, some industrial plants, which are failing because there's no accountability. So and that has to do also with the Bolivian context, not China. There is, a very weak democracy in Bolivia right now. It's been weakening, and it has been weakening. And I am part of the legislative from 4 years ago, and it's really hard to do our work of, controlling. And there's not a judiciary that functions as it should. So all these things combined are generating a very serious situation in which the government, which is really authoritarian, is being rewarded by China, because China doesn't care very much if the government is democratic or not. And it doesn't care about the consequences of the infrastructure that's being built and the problems. They just don't care. And we don't, and I'm finishing with this, we don't have there's no anyone to complain to. That would be different if it would be a European company. You have a civil society, you have media, you have a judiciary, you have, I don't know, and even the companies, they have some, name to defend. That doesn't happen in China's case, and the state is more or less the same as the company, as the party. So it's like a wall, and they just keep silence and don't respond to anything and move on. So this is the situation in Bolivia, more or less.
Gosh, thank you so much. We are rapidly running out of time, I see, looking at the clock. So I'm just going to ask probably 2 questions, and you can choose which of them you want to answer. First, about Taiwan. You've seen that IPAC has this project to try to demonstrate in our own countries the economic importance of Taiwan to our own domestic economies. What more do you think can be done to raise awareness about that? First question. And the second one is, what advice would you give to parliamentarians who get a bit scared about speaking up about China because things might happen to them like they've happened to you, Uffe? And even you, David, you were also targeted in the APT-31 attack. So either of those 2 things, either the raising awareness about Taiwan economy or about advice to parliamentarians. I'll come to you first, David.
Well, I'll take the second one. Yes, I've been hacked, and I've been threatened by the Chinese embassy in Sweden. And I say like you do, I take it as a badge of honor. It means that we actually can make a difference. And we have to remember that this is why many of us chose politics, to do something good for the world. This is why we're here. The old African proverb, if you want to go fast, run alone. If you want to go far, run together. I think that's where we find strength, in the network. And I have to, even if we are running out of time, saying that this couldn't be done without IPAC and the way that you actually bonded us together, that you helped to find and define how we should work. And you were always the little annoying part that kept pushing us. Even if we were busy, you kept pushing us, reminding us, forcing us to remember, even when we were busy in budget times or whatever. So I think that it's not about daring only, it's about finding the priority. And that's where we need someone like the spider on the web to do it together with us, because many politicians are brave, but they have a lot to do. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, David. You're reminding me of what Beijing said about IPAC in the early days. It called you the nuisance alliance. You've made me feel like something of a nuisance too. Uffe, coming to you.
I'll follow up on you, David, because I think a lot of people, of course, don't really understand maybe the impact of IPAC. And for me, as a former politician, I stepped down in 2 years ago. IPAC was some of the most inspiring I have experienced as a politician, because this was not a cooperation between sister parties. This was actually a cooperation between parliamentarians across party lines. And it was a really grassroots feeling about it, and it was very spontaneous, and it was very quick. And I still remember some of our Zoom calls, and suddenly had this feeling that I could have a direct talk with colleagues in the Canadian Parliament or in the Swedish Parliament, or all the way down to New Zealand and Australia. And what was fun for me, at least, was that we coordinated our activities. So we learned from each other and said, okay, if you will ask this question to your parliament in Canada, then I'll do it the same in Denmark. So it was actually very lively, and on top of that, most of all, very, very important and very meaningful. So I think that the reason why we could formulate a very critical statement in the Danish Parliament a few years ago was because of the inspiration I got from you guys. So I'm really happy to sit here besides in between 2 good colleagues.
Thank you, Uffe.
Yeah.
And Cecilia, either on the importance of the Taiwanese economy or on the courage to speak out?
Yeah, I would like to round up 2 ideas. I'm joining IPAC because we worry about China and we need to cooperate. And it's very important to share the experiences. And I'm the new on the block, But so it's vital for us. Let me mention two aspects of it. Lithium. China has signed a not a contract, but a convenio in Spanish. It's another word for agreement, in order to keep it secret. And they are saying patent would be the reason for it, which is a problem. You understand the importance of lithium, so I'm not going into details. So that's a very strategic problem for Bolivia, and I think the world in the end. But also the Amazonas region. There are Chinese capitals, in this case, private capitals that are, investing in illegal gold mining, for instance, which is destroying the Amazon region, as well as deforestation and some other problems. So as you can see, we really need to cooperate. We really need the network in order to fight against these forces that are really destroying countries like mine. And that I find it so important to be here and to start this journey because it's a strategic issue, not only for my country, but in the end, because what I mentioned, for the world, we are together in this, right?
Thank you. Well, we are regrettably out of time for our panel. I want to thank my panelists very much indeed. Cecilia, all the way from Bolivia, Uffe from around the corner, and David Lega from Sweden today. It's been a great pleasure to speak to you, and I think thank you particularly, Cecilia, for that perspective. As the IPAC network grows in Latin America, the concern we're finding around Beijing's rise is so much rooted in either environmentalism or in workers' rights, who are very badly abused throughout South America because of the Belt and Road Initiative and some of the other associated economic abuses. And it's such an important perspective. Thank you very much indeed for being here to my panel. Thank you.
Thank you.